全世界围剿中国制造，为什么从价格优势到孤岛经济？
The whole world is encircling made in China. Why has it gone from a price advantage to an island economy? Do you have a feeling that the whole world dislikes us, or has even shown its cards and refuses to play with us anymore? Why are overseas e-commerce platforms turning against Chinese businesses overnight? It seems the entire world is boycotting our Chinese products. Why has the global influence of Chinese brands regressed by 30 years? Why is it that low-price e-commerce is causing us to cannibalize ourselves, but it will certainly not kill off foreign competition? Because they won't even play the game with us. Live stream e-commerce and the platform economy have set Chinese brands back 30 years. The scrutiny of TikTok, the crackdown on Pinduoduo's overseas version, and the widespread encirclement of Chinese-made goods by countries like Mexico, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and many in Europe explain everything. The once proud, made in China label and Chinese goods have now become a global joke and a laughingstock. You might never imagine that made in China is facing all kinds of pursuits and blockades worldwide. The advantage of good quality at a low price, which we were once proud of, has now become the very poison that consumes us. The boycotts faced by low-price, low-quality Chinese e-commerce platforms like TikTok, Pinduoduo's overseas version, the Yiwu International Trade City, and others are just a glimpse of the bigger picture. We are now turning ourselves into an isolated island, with endless internal competition but no opportunity to compete externally. Meanwhile, others are living well, working 3 or 4 days a week for just a few hours a day, maintaining high profits, and enjoying life. But when we enter the game, we compete on labor. I'll work for 10 hours. We compete on price. You sell for 50 renminbi, approximately $7. I'll sell for 10 renminbi, approximately $1.40. It's a fight to the death. Price penetration is no longer effective, yet extremely monopolistic and valueless platforms like Pinduoduo are still sucking the blood of our hardworking masses, making it hard to even make ends meet. The value chain, industrial chain, and supply chain are collapsing. There are no jobs, no income, not even factories. Low price, low-quality e-commerce and inferior Chinese goods are killing us, and in 9 renminbi and 90 cents, approximately $1.39, e-commerce model will block all our escape routes. And before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching this video from. Connecting with viewers from all around the world is a huge inspiration for us. Thank you so much.
大家有没有感觉到，好像全世界都在抵制我们？
It seems that the whole world is turning against China. Recently, Mexico sealed off China's Yiwu commodity city. Temu was shut down in Vietnam. India imposed higher tariffs on Chinese steel, and even Russia started taxing Chinese goods. Made in China is now being encircled globally. Once proud of its price advantage, China has now become economically isolated. The core reason lies in its own low-price strategy, which has made other nations uneasy. The typical pattern of Chinese companies is this: enter a new market, then slash prices dramatically. For example, a pair of socks that sells for 20 yuan, about $2.75, in Europe or the US becomes only 5 yuan, about $0.70. Once Chinese firms step in, collapsing local profit margins and driving competitors out of business. Naturally, those countries respond with resistance and boycotts. While low-price e-commerce can destroy domestic businesses in China, it rarely works abroad because foreign markets simply refuse to play that game. The rise of live-stream shopping and platform-based economies has pushed Chinese brands backward by at least 30 years. Many countries, including Mexico, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and several in Europe, have imposed new restrictions targeting TikTok Shop, Temu, and Pinduoduo's overseas platforms. This shows that what was once a national pride, made in China, has now become a global laughingstock. How can Chinese companies keep prices so low? Largely through overworked employees and suppressed wages. In Europe or the US, workers enjoy benefits earned through centuries of struggle. 6-hour workdays, and 100 yuan, around $13 pay. In contrast, Chinese workers willingly work 10 hours for just 50 yuan, about $6.80, even volunteering for unpaid overtime and salary cuts. On the surface, this looks like diligence. In reality, it undermines global labor standards. Many Chinese companies also lack the spirit of mutual benefit. Take the electric vehicle industry, for example. China's production capacity is immense. Self-sufficiency in parts reaches 80%, and most patents are domestically held, leaving little room for foreign cooperation. Meanwhile, Tesla opened all its patents as early as 2014, fueling the rise of EV industries worldwide, including in China, and still securing its leadership. That's what vision looks like. In contrast, many Chinese firms see other countries merely as markets to extract profit from, not as partners to share success with. When Western auto workers lose their jobs in the traditional fuel car industry, they have no reason to support China's rise. Such a one-sided approach may appear powerful, but hides deep risks of isolation. To truly go global, Chinese enterprises must stop acting as predators and start becoming ecosystem builders. Only then can Made in China travel farther and last longer.
中国对世界最大的贡献是什么？
What is China's greatest contribution to the world? Undoubtedly, driving down prices. But a shocking fact is that foreign countries are starting to dislike China's high-quality, low-cost goods. Why is that? Take China's pride, electric vehicles, EVs, as an example. Under normal logic, I produce a fantastic EV in China, highly intelligent, with long range, and cheap, completely outclassing traditional gasoline car brands. Isn't it natural for them to sell globally? Yet, in reality, foreign governments think, these Chinese EVs are so good and cheap. Won't they destroy our domestic auto industry? What about employment? Unemployment means riots and wars. Whether a car is comfortable, user-friendly, or cost-effective is what ordinary people care about. But a sovereign nation prioritizes social stability, namely, jobs. Jobs are the foundation of a nation's stability. Looking back at China's century-long struggle, we've always tried to block high-quality industrial goods from flooding our market. Sound a bit absurd, right? Until we mastered advanced industrial technology to produce high-quality, affordable goods. As a latecomer to industrialization, how did China acquire cutting-edge technology? By trading market access for technology. Take the auto industry. To attract foreign carmakers to build factories in China, import tariffs on cars were around 200% in 1980, signaling that pure imports weren't welcome, but factories were. As China's auto industry grew, tariffs dropped to 130% in 1994 and 25% by 2006, remaining so today. Why is Europe now imposing tariffs on Chinese EVs? There was already a 10% tariff, but these vehicles now threaten Europe's auto industry, risking mass unemployment. So, tariffs target threatening Chinese carmakers, especially SAIC's MG brand, which accounts for 7 out of every 10 Chinese cars in Europe, all shipped from China, creating no local jobs. Thus, SAIC faces a 35.3% tariff, totaling 45.3%, to offset the low-cost advantage of Chinese production. Either exit the European market or build factories there to create jobs. Sovereign nations will use tariffs to block products from advanced industrial countries. Either you sell despite high tariffs, and the extra tax subsidizes local lagging industries, or you build factories, trading technology for market access to foster local supply chains. The path China is on is the one developed nations once took. Now, Chinese carmakers like BYD, Chery, and Great Wall are building factories in Southeast Asia, and in the coming years, Belt and Road countries will see many Chinese joint venture factories. Chinese workers will surely go abroad. The challenge for China is whether these overseas factories can bring profits back home to boost the service sector. Otherwise, deindustrialization from overseas factories will trigger massive unemployment. If a positive cycle of repatriated profits forms, China can start reaping other countries' demographic dividends. If not, well, we can still read this book.
为什么全球都在抵制中国？
Why is the world boycotting China? De Gizy says it's because seemingly diligent Chinese people use suicidal involution to disrupt the systems and rules that European and American companies and workers fought for over centuries, making the world resist China as destroyers of global order. But this is a foolish view. Europe and America prospered by plundering colonies for their first bucket of gold, then leading the first and second industrial revolutions, gaining a natural first-mover advantage and more production resources, controlling market discourse and pricing power, and starting to dump high-priced industrial goods to exploit cheap raw materials from other countries, rebranding this as free trade. Before the 21st century, China endured price and technology monopolies, once paying tens of thousands of CNY for a single screw because we couldn't make it. The so-called rule-breaking is because those rules were designed to lock latecomers into low-value industries, and patents were originally meant to block followers, though the narrative has since been twisted. Global development hinges on economic growth, which has always been about pioneers plundering latecomers through technological and informational gaps. China once traded 8 billion pairs of socks and shirts for one airplane. To change this, Chinese people had to join global market competition. Without technological breakthroughs, avoiding low-price involution meant products couldn't gain market share, leading to fewer jobs, no profits, and stunted national growth. Low-price involution was China's reluctant but necessary path to primitive capital accumulation in a specific developmental stage. For example, tunnel boring machines, engines, and chips were exorbitantly priced before China's breakthroughs, but once Chinese firms produced them, prices plummeted, sometimes even below ours. Why doesn't anyone call that involution? Does China need Europe and America's permission to feed its people? The global boycott of China is largely because taking others' jobs is like killing their parents, compounded by geopolitical and ideological issues, like U.S. tariffs, Lithuania's provocations, and protecting local industries. Thus, the claim of China's suicidal involution doesn't hold. It's more like proof of Chinese people striving for a better life. Involution isn't wrong. It's just sometimes excessive. The NDRC calls for comprehensively addressing involutionary competition, referring to firms cutting costs at workers' expense, harming labor rights, and making domestic workers pay for foreigners' cheap goods. So, curing involution means stopping worker exploitation, not the involution that takes others' jobs. Now that Chinese industries lead globally with pricing and discourse power, why not raise prices to support domestic jobs and labor rights, increasing workers' wages and benefits?
这2年大家有没有发现
In the past 2 years, has everyone noticed that it seems the whole world is boycotting us? Look, recently Mexico seized the Chinese Yiwu commodity city, India imposed tariffs on Chinese steel, and even neighboring Russia, our so-called closest friend, is imposing tariffs on us. The whole world is targeting China, but why don't they boycott Japan, South Korea, or even India, who rarely face such issues? The fundamental reason is that the low-price strategy Chinese enterprises rely on for survival has begun to backfire. What is the logic of many Chinese companies? As soon as they enter a market, they first push the prices down, even selling at a loss, to eventually dominate that market. This is unfair, vicious competition, and I think everyone has felt this in some way. Why is it that when everyone has a chance to make money together, you insist on a suicidal strategy that leaves others with no way out? There are actually deeper social roots behind this. The domestic environment is intensely competitive, which has also given many of our companies a strong sense of crisis. Don't think that companies going overseas has nothing to do with us. Is dominating the market necessarily a good thing? Think about why Chinese companies can push prices so low. Isn't it largely achieved through the high-intensity work of their vast workforce? To put it bluntly, it's about reducing labor costs. In Europe, America, or other countries, workers' benefits are generally quite good, but those were won through a century of struggle. For instance, they might work 6 hours a day for 100 yuan, but then a Chinese person comes along and says, I can work 10 hours for just 50 yuan, approximately $7, willing to work overtime, voluntarily taking a pay cut, and even signing a striver's agreement. It would be strange if they welcomed you. On the surface, It seems Chinese people are very hardworking, but in reality, you have already destroyed others' systems and rules. To put it bluntly, our companies still lack a vision of mutual benefit and win-win cooperation. Take electric vehicles, for example. China's new energy vehicle industry is massive, but we produce most of the parts ourselves, with a self-sufficiency rate of over 80%, and we hold a large number of patents. But look at Tesla next door. They opened up all their patents as early as 10 years ago, which spurred the rise of a large number of new energy vehicle companies worldwide, including in China, while securing their own position as the industry leader. That is vision. In contrast, many of our companies simply view other countries as export markets to make their money, without establishing cooperative relationships with local businesses to share the pie. Now, think about it. Who would have the motivation to support our industry's development? The act of leaving others with no way out may seem invincible, but it hides a huge crisis and will ultimately only lead to walking a dark alley alone. Therefore, to go further in overseas markets, it is necessary to maintain one's original competitiveness while also balancing internal and external interests.
你有没有发现，最近几年
Have you noticed that in recent years, more and more countries have started to boycott made in China? Our products are clearly of good quality and inexpensive, so why are they unwilling to accept them? Take 2023 as an example. The European Union imposed high tariffs on our electric vehicles, the United States directly restricted Chinese companies like Huawei and TikTok, and even some traditionally friendly countries are quietly raising the import barriers for Chinese goods. Why is this happening? I have a friend who works in foreign trade, and he told me a startling truth. If we don't control it, made in China can truly crush the local industries of many countries. He gave an example. A home appliance from a European or American brand might sell for $1,000, while we sell it for only $300, a price that completely dominates. In the long run, their factories simply cannot survive. Why can we achieve such low prices? The reasons are simple. First, our industrial chain is too complete. From raw materials to finished products, we hardly need to rely on imports. Second, our labor costs are low, our workers are diligent and hardworking, and willing to work overtime, things that European and American countries simply cannot match. But here comes the problem. If we continue to use a low-price strategy to capture the global market, what will be the ultimate outcome? The answer may be harsh. We will become a public enemy. Because once we have driven out all competitors, what may await us is complete economic isolation. What do you think Made in China should do to break this impasse? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments section.
在国外生活对咱们国人来说有一个特别扎心的现实情况。
For us Chinese people living abroad, there is a particularly heart-wrenching reality. Many foreign supermarkets print a sentence on their food packaging that says, "This product does not contain any ingredients from China." Why is this? On one hand, food safety standards abroad are extremely strict. For example, in Australia, there was an egg supplier who incorrectly labeled regular eggs as free-range, resulting in a sky-high fine of 750,000 Australian dollars, approximately $487,500. Another important reason is that foreign countries have previously recalled large quantities of food that did not meet safety standards, and a majority of it came from China. When I arrived in Australia a few years ago, I saw a news report about 28 Australians who contracted hepatitis A after eating frozen berries produced in China. The crucial part is that less than 2 years later, the same type of berries caused another hepatitis A outbreak in Australia. So, gradually, in the minds of foreigners, Chinese food has become synonymous with unsafe. To be honest, the food safety issues exposed on the 315 Gala a few days ago made me feel a bit ashamed myself. Why is food safety so well managed in foreign countries? For instance, here in Australia, the Australian oatmeal that every household eats clearly states on its packaging that 100% of the ingredients are sourced from Australia. And it indeed tastes very good and is very healthy. For foreign foods, what's on the ingredient list is exactly what you get. They don't deceive you at all. I was curious before and spent several tens of yuan, a few US dollars, on a box of oatmeal in a domestic supermarket, only to find that it contained ingredients like non-dairy creamer and artificial flavors, yet was labeled with words like natural and healthy. But look at this Australian oatmeal that I eat every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's not only pure, but also high in protein and dietary fiber, and it's not even that expensive. Moreover, when you eat it, you get a very natural sense of well-being. That's why I always recommend that people eat this kind of oatmeal. Of course, we can't make a sweeping generalization and say that all Chinese food is bad, but we must first admit our own shortcomings. There are indeed many unscrupulous businesses engaging in dishonest practices, and it is these people who are constantly eroding our image. So, if we start now, refuse to lower our own standards, and carefully select high-quality products, we can avoid falling into these traps.
为什么都在排华？华人呢，到底做错了什么？
Why is there anti-Chinese sentiment? What exactly have the Chinese people done wrong? Today, let's analyze the reasons for this sentiment from an American perspective. First of all, in the eyes of white Americans, the diligence of the Chinese took away job opportunities from them during economic crises, plunging white Americans into financial hardship due to unemployment. In 1870, California's economy fell into a depression, and the unemployment rate for whites was as high as 20%, while the number of Chinese laborers in factories was continuously increasing. Secondly, in the eyes of white Americans, the low cost of Chinese labor lowered their already not-so-high wage levels, causing their income to decrease repeatedly. This increased the pressure in their lives, forced them to lower their living standards, and resulted in a decline in their quality of life. Third, from the perspective of white Americans, the ability of the Chinese to endure hardship reduced their own benefits. For one, because Chinese laborers did not mind working longer hours, the working hours of white Americans were also forced to extend. For another, because Chinese laborers could work in all sorts of difficult and even harsh environments, the working conditions for white Americans also became worse than before. Because of these advantages, the Chinese were extremely competitive in the American labor market. However, in the eyes of white Americans, these very advantages of the Chinese became the main reason for disrupting the originally stable and orderly American labor market. This economic competition between the Chinese and whites triggered hostility from whites towards the Chinese, which gradually evolved into an anti-Chinese sentiment among white Americans.
As we reflect on China's journey in the global arena, from affordable products to facing trade barriers, there's a profound lesson to learn. True value lies not just in price, but in sustainability and collaboration. China has showcased its strength through high-quality, low-cost goods, yet this has sparked concerns in other nations about economic imbalances and job losses. We see that focusing solely on low prices, without fostering mutually beneficial relationships, risks leading to isolation. So, what's the lesson? It's about balance. Whether you're a content creator, an entrepreneur, or simply an individual, we must learn to deliver value not just for ourselves, but for the community around us. China has come a long way from trading markets for technology to leading in various industries. But to go further, a shift is needed. Compete not just on price, but on quality, innovation, and shared opportunities. Look at Tesla, an example of opening patents to uplift an entire industry while solidifying its own leadership. In a connected world, success isn't about defeating others, it's about growing together. China, with its immense strength and potential, can lead the way, not just through products, but through a spirit of cooperation and responsibility. As young people, we can apply this lesson too. Work hard, but don't forget to build lasting relationships and create value for all. Let's strive for a future that's not only prosperous, but also harmonious. Thank you for watching Chinese Emotion. Share your thoughts below, and let's spread this value together.